If I think back, it was years ago when I was working at a law firm. I had the thought one night, reading documents and doing the things that lawyers do, like, God, I wish software could do this for me. And then for years and years, we looked at the space and spent a lot of time understanding the various ways that technology can understand language, and then came across Deepset and was super excited. But I'd love to understand what it was that inspired you to start the company, and what was the initial spark?
As we founders had, all of us had a background in machine learning, and of course natural language processing as one discipline of machine learning caught our interest. We had a quite good insight into this whole discipline, and somehow it was very clear that this language awareness is going to be delivered via natural language processing as a sub-discipline. And when we founded Deepset in 2018, the timing back then was, we chose this exact. We felt this is like the right time now, because we had a quite strong technical hypothesis. Coming from machine learning, from natural language processing, we looked into open source communities, we looked into papers, we monitored the state of the art, we saw how things evolved. And there were some signposts around that time that we are going to see probably a quite big jump in the state of the art and in the possibilities that, in what is possible actually with natural language processing around that time. So we expected something like, transfer learning in NLP as we saw it years before in computer vision. And this would mean we have way better performance than before. It's way easier to take natural language processing and move it, to different use cases, apply it without this cumbersome process of always generating new data, always training. Given that our hypothesis became true, Google Research released BERT by the end of 2018. We saw this big jump in NLP, given that we worked from day one on with enterprise customers, made all the learnings, what it takes to really build NLP production ready at scale into products. We had all we needed, and this was then how we later on came up with Haystack and why we built Haystack.
Alongside the funding round, which we're obviously super excited about, we're also today announcing the launch of Deepset Cloud, which is the commercial offering, and it'd be great to hear a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So Deepset Cloud is, as a product, mostly focused on those developers who use Haystack, and it's not something that should overcome, or it's nothing that contains proprietary elements, something that you can only build in Deepset Cloud. Deepset Cloud is more like a platform that should make it easier for developers, mostly in enterprise setups, to be even faster in building their application with Haystack. So it's a lot about overcoming, let's say, organizational challenges they have.
What are some of the interesting use cases that people are using Haystack and Deepset Cloud going forward for?
So the first big, let's say, family of use cases, so to say, are mostly around, accessing all of the data and information that is available in enterprises. So there was a big effort, especially in the past years. It's still an ongoing effort, of course, to somehow unify data, to set up data warehouses, data lakes, mostly unstructured data in there, right? And all of these efforts were quite successful. So we have these systems in place and everything is somehow consolidated, but it's still very hard to access. And this is, you do not really unfold the full value of this. So if you think about something like knowledge management, where, let's say, there's so many project reports in an enterprise, and you want that it's accessible to each and every team, such that they know who is an expert on a particular topic, what are risks when thinking about implementing, a certain software. Or I don't know, what did we do for a certain customer? Is there another team that worked with this customer? Is there any other experience we have? These are quite common use cases we see. And you can transfer this to actually each and every department within an enterprise. If it's the legal department that wants to get access to all the information in contracts, to understand, okay, are there certain risks? Are we properly hedged against natural disasters? I don't know. All of these aspects. There's so much knowledge and information hidden in data, and the data is there, but it's not really accessible. And this information access or information retrieval or search, you could even say, these are probably the first use cases that are going to make it to the mainstream. And further down the road, of course, the generation models that generate not just text, but artifacts, right? Where we can use language and say, hey, we want a piece of code. I would like to have, I don't know, a document or a project plan that contains these milestones. And, the NLP model builds that for you. This is then what we see further down the road.
Yeah, when you first described that to me, I was hugely excited, and all I was thinking was that finally someone has solved this problem of back when I was thinking about this originally, I wouldn't have had to read all these documents to get my answer. I could just type something in a natural language query and get what I need. It would have saved me a ton of time, but better late than never. So, like there's a lot of different ways. The space has come on technically incredibly in the last few years, and so there's a lot of different tools, a lot of different ways of language comprehension using software. How do you see the market developing, and where do you see Deepset sitting within that?
Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, NLP, this modern way of NLP is driven through this transformer models. This is something, probably most people already have a touch point with it today, right? Google search announced end of 2019 already that they're using a transformer model in Google search. So we're technically using it every day, and this will increase, right? So everyone will interact with these NLP models, even though people might not even know about that, but we will have them anywhere. There will be definitely a large amount of companies and players who will mostly build software for smaller and medium-sized companies that is pretty much verticalized. Very specific point solutions. For example, an engine that helps you to be faster in writing articles or product sheets or stuff like that. Things that support your sales force maybe in getting information out of their lead databases. This is pretty much stuff where a lot of vertical players will arise from. And then we see the enterprises who will probably really introduce a new layer in their tech stack. So when you think today about this classic enterprise tech stack, you have, of course, infrastructure at the bottom. Then there's like databases, data lakes, data warehouses that are more or less built on top of that. Then you have application systems on top, and in between there is this. We think about it as the semantic layer. This means a piece that somehow connects the connection between the data that is there and the applications, and therefore between the end users as well. And this spot, this is something where a standard or standards will be needed, where these standards will fit in exactly that position. We believe that these standards must be open source because, in the enterprise tech stack, all standards are open source, or most standards are open source. And of course, this is pretty much the position that excites us a lot. And this is also where we want to become one of the de facto standards.
There's a lot of people paying attention to NLP now, as you described, a ton of different use cases, incredibly powerful, can save businesses and people an incredible amount of time productivity. I'd love your perspective on what are some of the market forces driving the increased attention on NLP today.
So, as you also introduced it, right? I think everyone can somehow relate to a problem where NLP would be super useful and super helpful. So I think I would even say it's almost obvious that there are so many applications, right, where NLP can fit in. I think even when you think about the day we started to build computers actually and to use them, it was somehow a natural desire of developers and humans to somehow bring it closer to make them actually understand human language and bring them closer to humans by the means of interaction and communication. Therefore, I think the main drivers are not so much the applications, but rather, the capabilities we build on. And there's on the one hand, the data part, right? So there is a lot of data out there and many efforts were made, data warehouses, data lakes, to consolidate that, to organize that. Enterprises, introduce products and platforms to manage all of this variety of data. And now the next step is how can we process that, and not just process it, but also how can we make it accessible, right? And this is where NLP is super powerful because yeah, it speaks the language everyone is speaking, so everyone can somehow access and find what they need in this large bulk of data. So probably there's a big drive and a big, like really like a big interest to now build on top of this data that is now in place and somehow way better organized than before. And the second aspect is probably the state of the art of the technology. So um, uh, transformer models really, changed the game, and the great thing, in particular about NLP, was not just that we had this big revolution and these transformer models introduced through BERT by the end of 2018 when Google actually published a paper and released the open source model. But there were so many open source projects then around it that supported this Haystack, but also, for example, Hugging Face with the Transformers framework and the Model Hub, where it's very accessible. It's something you can explore, something people they can look at it, they can work with it, get their hands on it, and this is what creates trust. You see, wow, this is powerful. This stuff works. This technology is somewhat mature, and we can adopt it. And why aren't we using it in all these applications where we are struggling with every day, right? And I think these two aspects are pretty much the main drivers for the strong interest and strong pull towards NLP.
Yeah, no, as you said, there's incredibly powerful technology. It doesn't mean we can use it yet, but that's
Mm.
where Deepset is bridging the gap. So excited to see all the power it brings to people going forward.